AITA for refusing to split the bill with friends at a restaurant because I was tired of paying much more than I ordered. They decided to teach me how to pay, so they came to my house with food and a check. I am a 26-year-old guy, and for the past few years, I've had this pretty regular tradition with my group of friends. Every week, almost like clockwork, we go out for dinner together. It started out pretty casually, just a fun way to catch up, try some new places, and unwind after work. Somewhere along the way, it kind of solidified into this unwritten rule that every week, we would pick a restaurant, go out, eat, drink, and split the bill equally at the end. At first, I did not question it at all. I figured that was just how people did things when they went out in groups. I had seen it in movies, I had heard other people talk about it, and honestly, I did not mind at the time. It felt easy and I was just happy to be included in a regular tradition with friends. Back then, I was not really keeping track of who ordered what, and I was honestly just grateful for the social time. But as the months rolled on, I started to notice a pattern. I would show up, order a main dish, usually something pretty modest, think pasta, maybe a burger, or some kind of rice dish. I would ask for water because I have never really been into alcohol, and I do not have much of a sweet tooth, so I almost never got dessert. Meanwhile, my friends, who I do love and have known for years, would go absolutely wild. Mike, Emma, Jake, and Taylor have very different dining habits than I do. They love appetizers. They love desserts. They especially love cocktails, craft beers, fancy wines, you name it. Every meal was like a mini celebration for them. I would sit there, quietly eating my pasta and sipping my water, while the table filled up with plates of calamari, fried zucchini, charcuterie boards, cheesecake slices, and chocolate lava cakes. And the drinks, rounds and rounds of drinks, expensive cocktails with infused syrups, or bottles of wine that cost more than my entire meal. I noticed it at first as just a nagging thought. Wow, I am definitely not getting my money's worth here. But it was not until I started tracking my expenses more closely that I realized how bad it was. A meal that should have cost me around $20 was regularly costing me $40 or $50. And that was not even counting the tip. Every time, I was essentially subsidizing everyone else's night out. I kept telling myself it was not a big deal. These were my friends. It was just money. But the resentment kept building. It was not even about the money itself, it was the principle. I was paying double, sometimes even more, for food and drinks I was not even consuming, while everyone else got to indulge guilt-free because the bill was just getting spread out equally. I know some people might say that is just part of group dinners. But at what point does it stop being fair? When one person is drinking nothing but water and eating one entree, and another person is ordering 3 cocktails, 2 appetizers, a steak, and dessert, is splitting things evenly really the fair way to do it? It all came to a head last week. We were out at this trendy spot, one of those places where everything on the menu is overpriced but beautifully plated. We were laughing, chatting, the usual vibe. I ordered a simple pasta dish and my usual water. Meanwhile, the others ordered cocktails, shared 3 appetizers, ordered the most expensive entrees, and then, just to cap off the night, 2 desserts for the table. The bill came, and like always, someone grabbed it and said something like, "Okay, we will just split it 5 ways." And I felt this wave of frustration wash over me. I had already decided before we even sat down that this time, I was not going to let it slide. I was tired of paying for food I never ate and drinks I never touched. So I spoke up. I said, "Actually, I am just going to pay for what I ordered tonight." The table went silent. It was like I had just said I was moving to another country and cutting off all contact forever. Everyone kind of stared at me, and I could see the confusion on their faces. Mike, who almost always took the lead with the bill, said something like, "That is going to be so inconvenient for the waiter." Emma said it felt like I was making things unnecessarily complicated, like I was breaking some sacred code we had all silently agreed to. I stayed calm. I was not rude about it, I just said I was tired of covering other people's meals and drinks, especially since I was only eating one main dish and drinking water every time. I said it was not personal, I just wanted to pay my own way from now on. The mood shifted. Not in a huge dramatic way, but there was definitely tension. Taylor made some half-joking comment about how I was keeping score or being petty over a few bucks, which made me feel even more justified in standing my ground. It was not a few bucks. Over the course of months and months, I had probably spent hundreds of dollars on food and drinks I did not consume. I flagged the waiter, asked for a separate check for myself, and paid quietly. The whole thing felt so awkward, like I had just broken some unspoken social contract. Afterward, the conversation felt stiffer than usual, and when we left the restaurant, I could tell everyone was still processing it. I do not think they see it from my perspective, or if they do, they think I am cheap or uptight for bringing it up after all this time. I do not think I am wrong for wanting to pay for just my own food. It feels fair. It feels right. But I cannot shake the feeling that, in their eyes, I broke some kind of social rule and now I am, that guy, the one who made everything weird. So I guess I am wondering, am I the asshole for finally putting my foot down and saying I will only pay for what I ordered, even after going along with the split the bill system for so long? Update 1. After that evening, when I had dared to break the sacred tradition of splitting the bill equally, our group chat practically turned into a battlefield. It started with Emma, of course, Emma, who had always been the unofficial social coordinator of the group, the one who picked the restaurants, the one who made sure everyone's birthdays were celebrated, the one who could turn even the simplest dinner into a whole event. She wrote this long, dramatic message, the kind where you have to scroll and scroll just to get to the end, all about how friends do not do things like this to each other, how in our group everything had always been equal, and how that equality was what made our friendship special. According to her, we had built something rare, a group where no one kept score, where no one had to feel like they owed anyone else, because it all balanced out in the end. And now, because of me, that balance was shattered. Mike was the next to pile on. His message was shorter, but the disappointment radiated off the screen like heat. He said he could not understand how I could be so petty over a few dollars, especially after all these years of friendship. He talked about all the memories we had made around those dinner tables, the inside jokes, the birthday toasts, the times we had all stayed out way too late and stumbled home together laughing. To him, my refusal to split the bill was not just about money. It was a rejection of all of that history, like I was saying it had never meant anything to me. Then Jake jumped in, and his message had a different energy entirely. Less disappointment, more aggression. He asked what I even meant by all this. Did I really feel sorry for my own friends? Did I really think they were trying to take advantage of me? Did I honestly believe that my friends, the people I had known for years, the people who had shown up for me during breakups, work problems, family drama, were so greedy that they would intentionally leave me with a bigger bill just so they could save a few bucks? According to Jake, what I had done was not just embarrassing, it was insulting. I had made them all feel like freeloaders without ever giving them the chance to explain or even notice there was an issue. The only remotely neutral voice was Taylor, and even that was lukewarm at best. Taylor wrote that he could understand my perspective, that it made sense why someone might not want to pay for more than they ordered, but that it also created unnecessary tension in a group that had never had that kind of tension before. It was one of those messages that tried to walk the line between both sides but ended up just making it clear that Taylor would rather I had just kept quiet and gone along with the group. I did not respond right away. Honestly, I had to sit with it for a while. I reread Emma's novel of a message more times than I can count, trying to understand how we had gotten to this point. All I had done was ask to pay for my own food. That was it. I had not insulted anyone, I had not accused anyone of anything, I had not made a big speech about fairness or financial boundaries. I had simply asked for a separate check and paid for myself. And somehow, that single action had detonated a bomb right in the center of our friend group. A week passed. The chat stayed quiet. No one invited me to anything, no one asked how I was, and I honestly started to think that this was it, that I had been quietly exiled from the group, that my years-long friendship with these people had ended over a plate of pasta and a glass of water. I started thinking about all the times I had been the one to cover the extra few dollars when the tip came up short, all the times I had gone along with expensive restaurant choices even when my budget was tight, all the times I had said nothing while the table filled with appetizers I did not touch and drinks I did not order. I wondered if any of that had ever mattered to them, or if all they saw now was the guy who dared to say no. And then, out of nowhere, the invitation came. A message in the group chat, simple, casual, like nothing had happened at all. Dinner this Friday, usual time, new spot, should be fun. It was so normal it felt almost surreal. I hesitated for a long time before replying. Part of me wanted to just ignore it, to let the silence stretch out until they got the message that I was done. But I also knew that if I skipped this dinner, if I let them go without me, it would be the final nail in the coffin. So I replied that I would come, hoping, stupidly, I guess, that we could all just move on. The dinner itself started off fine. Awkward, but fine. There was the usual small talk about work and shows we were watching and weekend plans. Nobody brought up the group chat explosion, and for a while, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could get past it. I ordered something simple, nothing flashy, and as usual, just a glass of water. It felt like we were all dancing around the tension, pretending it was not there even though it was practically sitting at the table with us. But then the check came. The server set it down in the middle of the table like always, and before anyone could say a word, Emma smiled, that tight, too wide smile she got when she was being nice, but really wanted to sink her teeth into someone. She said, "Well, no jokes this time, we pay equally, like always." Her voice was light, but the message was clear. This was not a request. It was a test. A demand. A declaration that my little rebellion was over, and it was time to fall back in line. I felt my face get hot, but I kept my voice calm. I said, just as clearly, that I would only be paying for myself and that this was not even discussed. The silence that followed was even heavier than the last time, but I did not care. The truth was, I was done arguing about it. I had made my choice, and they could either accept it or not. No one said anything. No one made a joke to lighten the mood or tried to talk me out of it. They just stared, like they were seeing me for the first time, like they could not believe I was really doing this again. I called the server over, asked for a separate check, and paid for my meal. Then I stood up, said goodbye, and went home. Update 2. I thought that would be the end of it. After the second restaurant incident, after I paid for my own meal, said goodbye, and walked out, I figured the message was clear. They didn't have to like it, but they couldn't say they didn't know where I stood. I assumed the group chat would either go silent, or they'd start planning things without me, which, honestly, I was already preparing myself for. I was even starting to accept the possibility that this friend group, the group I'd been part of for years, the people I'd shared holidays and birthdays and lazy Sunday dinners with, might not make it through something as simple as me wanting to pay for my own food. But then, a few days later, I was sitting at home, fully settled into a quiet evening, when I heard a knock on my door. Not a text, not a warning, just a sudden, unexpected knock. When I opened the door, I was stunned. All four of them were standing there, Emma, Mike, Jake, and Taylor, all grinning way too wide, holding bags stuffed with food containers, pizza boxes, bottles of soda and beer, and even a couple plastic containers that were very obviously desserts from some bakery. Before I could even ask what they were doing there, Emma stepped forward, practically shoving a pizza box into my hands while cheerfully announcing that they'd decided to throw a surprise party at my place. It was such an obvious ambush that I felt like I was watching it happen from outside my own body. There was no invitation, no warning, no chance for me to say no. They didn't even wait for me to react before they all pushed past me, carrying their bags of food and drinks, making themselves at home like this was just another one of our regular hangouts. The whole thing had this forced, fake cheerfulness to it, like they were overcompensating for how tense things had been lately. But they were trying so hard to act like everything was normal that I decided not to ruin the mood. After all, these were my friends, right? If this was their awkward, overly pushy way of making peace, I could swallow my irritation for one night. So I went along with it. I cleared off the coffee table while they unpacked everything. Pizza boxes stacked on top of each other, fried appetizers spilling out of greasy paper bags, desserts carefully placed in the middle like some kind of centerpiece. They put on a show of making sure I got a slice first, handing me a plate like they were trying to prove how generous they were, how much they valued me, how we were all in this together. I played my part too, laughing at their jokes, joining in when they reminisced about old stories, even though the whole thing felt slightly off, like a stage play where everyone knew their lines but no one really believed them. It was awkward in that way where no one wanted to admit it was awkward. There were a few too many exaggerated smiles, a little too much enthusiasm over completely mundane topics, and more than one long silence where no one knew what to say. But I kept telling myself it was fine. It was just food, just one night, and if this was their way of smoothing things over, I could roll with it. The resentment was still there, simmering under the surface, but I convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than reopening the argument. And then, just as I was starting to think I had survived the night without incident, they sprung the trap. Emma, with her performative grin still plastered across her face, pulled a folded piece of paper out of her bag and held it up like it was some kind of trophy. It took me a second to realize what it was, a printed-out check, with all the food and drinks we'd just eaten listed out, along with the total. And before I could even process it, they proudly announced that they'd gone ahead and divided the cost evenly between the 5 of us, and now it was time for me to pay my share. Because, they said, this is how fair friendship works. I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't even the money itself, it was the sheer audacity of it. They had shown up at my door, completely uninvited, taken over my living room, eaten their fill, and now they were trying to teach me a lesson about fairness by demanding I pay for food I never agreed to in the first place. It was so condescending, so smug, so blatantly a setup that I almost couldn't believe they were serious. But there they were, all 4 of them, sitting in my living room like they'd done me some huge favor by letting me contribute to their dinner. For a second, I didn't say anything. I took the check from Emma's hand and looked at it, slowly, carefully, counting up the items I had actually eaten, 1 slice of pizza, a handful of fries, and a small piece of cake that Taylor had pushed toward me after cutting it in half. That was it. I didn't touch the drinks, I didn't ask for any of the appetizers, and I sure as hell hadn't requested an ambush dinner at my own house. Without a word, I took out my wallet, counted out exactly enough cash to cover the food I had actually eaten, and placed it on the table. I made sure they saw me do it. I made sure they knew, without a doubt, that I wasn't playing along with whatever lesson they thought they were teaching me. Then, calmly and clearly, I told them I'd had enough. I was done pretending this was normal, done pretending their manipulative little stunts were about friendship, done pretending that being part of the group meant signing over my wallet every time we ate together. They just sat there, stunned. No one said a word at first, like they couldn't believe I had the nerve to stand up to them in my own house. Emma's face went bright red, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. And then, finally, she exploded, screaming that I was destroying the company with my selfishness. They were shocked, especially Emma, who screamed that I was destroying the company with my selfishness. Update 3. After that so-called party, after Emma's dramatic meltdown in my own living room and the stunned silence that followed, I knew I was done. There was no grand decision-making process, no back and forth weighing the pros and cons of cutting off people I had known for years. It was just over. Something had broken in that moment, something that had probably been cracked for a long time but had finally shattered under the weight of their entitled expectations and manipulative antics. The next morning, before I could even talk myself into second-guessing it, I left every group chat we shared. The main one we'd used to plan dinners, the smaller one where we sometimes talked about weekend trips or random memes, even the birthday planning chat they had made a few years ago. I wiped my hands of all of it. I wasn't going to leave a message or a parting speech, I was just done. But of course, they couldn't let it go that easily. The messages started rolling in almost immediately, as if they'd been sitting there, waiting for me to make the first move. The tone shifted wildly from one message to the next. Some were furious, outright accusing me of being stingy, selfish, a cheapskate who had wasted years of friendship over a few dollars. Others tried to play the guilt card, epic monologues about how real friends don't count every cent, how real friendship is about generosity and trust and not keeping track of who ordered what. Jake's messages were the hardest to read, not because they were particularly convincing, but because they were soaked in this performative heartbreak, the kind of over-the-top emotional manipulation you'd expect from a bad soap opera. He went on and on about how we'd grown up together, how we'd been through so much, how I was closer to him than his own brother at certain points in life. And now, apparently, I was throwing all of that away because I refused to pay for someone else's 4th round of cocktails. According to Jake, I wasn't just walking away from a group of friends, I was turning my back on my own history, rewriting all the good times into something petty and transactional. But the most interesting part came a few days later. I hadn't responded to a single one of their messages, I'd muted them all, left them unread, and moved on with my life. That's when I ran into someone I hadn't seen in a while, a casual acquaintance who worked at one of the more popular restaurants in town. We were just making small talk when, completely unprompted, they mentioned that they'd seen my old group there a couple of nights earlier. All of them, Emma, Mike, Jake, and Taylor, sitting at a big table, drinking, laughing, piling the table with appetizers and desserts the way they always did. And when the check came, they split it evenly, just like always. That part didn't surprise me at all. What did was how easily they had slipped back into the routine, like I had never existed, like they hadn't just spent weeks turning me into some villainous Scrooge for refusing to play along. They didn't stop going out, they didn't change how they did things, they didn't suddenly have an epiphany about fairness or personal budgets. They just found a new way to divide the bill evenly, one person lighter, sure, but with the same self-satisfied confidence that this was the only right way to do friendship. And that's when it really hit me. They were never angry because I had done something wrong. They were angry because I had disrupted the system. For years, I had unknowingly been a financial buffer, the person who made their extravagant dinners a little cheaper, who absorbed the cost of their extra drinks and indulgent orders without complaint. When I finally stood up for myself, it wasn't just inconvenient, it was a threat. Without me, the balance shifted. They couldn't pretend they were all contributing equally anymore because the person who had been quietly covering the difference was gone. I thought back to all the times I had justified it to myself, it's just how groups work, it all evens out, it's not worth the argument. I thought about every time I had handed over my card, swallowing the frustration, convincing myself that friendship was worth a little financial discomfort. But the truth was, it had never evened out. There was no unspoken balancing act where sometimes I paid more, sometimes they paid more, it had always flowed in one direction, from my wallet to their table, and they had been more than happy to let it stay that way. Now, I don't talk to any of them, and to be honest, I don't regret it. Not even a little. It's not just about the money, it's about what the money represented. Friendship shouldn't come with a price tag. It shouldn't come with silent expectations or a running tally of who owes who. Real friends don't see each other as financial safety nets, or walking ATMs, or convenient ways to make a pricey dinner a little more affordable. Real friends don't guilt-trip you for wanting basic fairness or ambush you in your own home to stage some twisted lesson in group economics. Since cutting ties, I've made a few new friends, people I met through work, through hobbies I've been neglecting, even through random chance. We've gone out to eat a few times, and every single time, without discussion or drama, everyone pays for what they ordered. No one blinks, no one complains, no one treats it like a betrayal of some sacred code. It's just normal, the way it always should have been. And you know what? Those meals taste a hell of a lot better. Sometimes you have to say, enough, in time, even if it means saying goodbye to old friends. Because friends who only see you as a wallet are not friends.